So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master is forcing me to open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto his lotus feet. So, Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized, text number 17. Avinasi tu tad vidhi yena sarvamidam tatam vinasham avyayasya na kaschid kartum arhati. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. I'll read that once more. Know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. Srila Prabhupada's purport. This verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in part or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. I'm going to pause there just for a second, go back and just connect to the last verses so that we can get a little context. O best amongst men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Text number 16. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the existent there is no cessation. This seers have concluded by studying the nature of both. So we're getting a clear idea of the nature of the soul. Non-existent things, there's no endurance. Everything is destroyed by inevitable the time factor. Mitya sarva harasha chaham. Nitya sarva harasha chaham. That Krishna says, I am all devouring death. So Krishna claims to be many things, and that is one of them. So everything is destroyed in the material world. Everything. The hard objects, the soft objects, the ethereal object, everything. So there's no endurance of the non-existent material. And they've also established, those who are seers of the truth, have concluded that of the existent, there is no cessation. That what actually exists is never destroyed. This seers have concluded by studying the nature of both. So that's where we're up to today. And we have so many a mood of thanks for those great seers of the truth who have established this, scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures. We hear the 6 Goswamis in Vrindavan. So we are very much blessed. So we should know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. And Srila Prabhupada has explained the pains and pleasures of the body are unknown to another. We are able to understand the spreading of the consciousness is there within one's specific body. Continuing, therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. This soul is described as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair point in size. Pretty small. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad confirms this. Balagra Satta Bhagasya Satadha Kalpitasya Cha Bhago Jivasa Vijneya Sachanantyaya Kalpate. Quote, when the upper point of a hair, if you can see it, is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts. Each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 5.9. Similarly, in the Bhagavatam, the same version is stated, quote, Keshagra Sata Bhagasya Satamasaha Sadrishat Makaha Jiva Shukshma Svarupoyam Sankyatito Hi Chitkana. Sankhya is counting, isn't it? There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms which are measured as 1/10,000th the upper portion of the hair, end quote. Therefore, the individual particle of spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than the material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. Interesting comparison there. I was stunned a little bit last week when I was down at the land and I got bitten by it wasn't a scorpion, it wasn't a snake. It's New Zealand, and in New Zealand there's not a lot of really dangerous creatures. This was it was just a wasp, I think, and it stung me, and I was just shocked by how instant it was like an electric shock. This tiny little wasp thing, and it got me just in the middle of the thumb and forefinger, and instantly it just went woof. It was so painful, just for whatever it was, half a minute or whatever it went on for. And I was just amazed at how quickly it could pervade every aspect of my body, and it was felt. And I was thinking, yeah, this is amazing how such small particle of energy can create such a big effect. So similarly, we're hearing about the soul and its tiny dimension, but its ability to pervade the whole body and drive and allow this body to function. Now, that's something we might discuss a little further as we go on here. Isn't it amazing? Some hear of the soul as amazing, some see him as amazing, others hear about him and still don't understand, Krishna says. So it is such an amazing thing. And Prabhupada used the example here that the medicine and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body is the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is the proof of the presence of the soul. Continuing, any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body. And Srila Prabhupada gave that example very often. He said that when somebody dies, we say, oh, my father has gone, my mother has gone, this person has gone. And you can point to the body and say, no, he's lying here on the floor or on the bed or wherever. He's right here. But you say, no, he's gone. So that gone factor it's a big subject, isn't it? But anyway, it's the soul. The subtle body also moves on. But the body that we related to is lying there, and that spiritual spark which animates the body is no longer there. Therefore, it's considered dead and the body's useless. But while it's there, while the spirit soul is there within the body, then we're thinking it's so important, it's so valuable, it's everything. But the body itself is thrown into the grave or burnt to ashes or fed to the jackals in whatever place and time you're situated. So any layman, Prabhupada says, can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body. And I was thinking, as I was looking at this verse, we're at the second chapter of Bhagavad-gita. It's very fundamental, but the depth of knowledge contained in every one of the verses is absolutely dynamic and able to bring us to the highest levels of conscious awareness of our spiritual existence. So it's very important when we look at these verses and discuss them, is to understand the transcendental nature of them. Everything about Krishna is transcendental. He speaks only transcendental knowledge. He doesn't have other knowledge to discuss, doesn't speak about it. And everything he speaks, like Bhagavad-gita, I mentioned that last week, right from the start, he begins to tell Arjuna, okay, you want to become my disciple, then here we go. He says, you're acting foolishly, lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief. And then every verse he's explaining this transcendental energy, this spiritual energy. So going back again to the purport, so the body is a dead body if it's minus consciousness, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Once it's gone, it's gone. And you can do what you want with it. Once the soul's left, no way. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad, the measurement of the atomic spirit soul is further explained. Eshon uratma chetasa veditavyo yasmin prana panchadha samvivesha pranaishchitam sarvam utam prajanam yasmin vishuddhe vibhavat yesha atmana, Asha Atma. Quote, the soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. So that's a big statement in itself, isn't it? The soul is atomic in size and it can be perceived by perfect intelligence. Okay, let's hear what else is being stated here in the Mundaka Upanishad. This atomic soul, wait to hear this, is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. Is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. It is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air. Its spiritual influence is exhibited. So this is real intelligence. The intelligence of the human being is not meant simply to become a polished version of animal life, but it's meant to be directed towards self-realization. Atato Brahma Jignasa. The first Vedic aphorism says that that is the human form of life is meant for inquiring into the absolute truth, not to become a polished animal. So we've got the higher intelligence, but if it's used for eating and sleeping and mating and defending in very so-called sophisticated ways, then we are Saeva Gokara, we are no better than the animals. So this is perfect intelligence. The atomic size of the soul is atomic, and the soul can only be perceived by perfect intelligence. So this is the whole process of Krishna consciousness, is to bring the soul from darkness to light. Tamasi Mai Jyotirgama. Come out of the darkness and come to the light, and that part of that process is this whole development of higher understanding, and not to be simply absorbed in the gross activities of material existence, but to come beyond that. So then Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain, the Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures, not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. Not a bad idea to become liberated from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. The material atmosphere is not such a great place as we're experiencing and discussing. So we want to be freed from that, but how to do that is not so easy. It requires perfect intelligence. The soul is atomic inside. It can be perceived by perfect intelligence. So the intelligence we hear also in the 2nd chapter is discussed that we want happiness. There can't be any happiness without peace, and there can't be any peace without a controlled mind, and a controlled mind can only be controlled by perfect intelligence, and perfect intelligence can only be developed by spiritual consciousness. So this is the whole process. This perfect intelligence can take us to the point ultimately where we get liberation from the entanglement of the material atmosphere, which is liberation for the soul. Srila Prabhupada is continuing. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures. As we've been quoting, Srila Prabhupada has been quoting the different Upanishads, explaining the constitution of the soul being different from the material elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. It's different from the subtle body also of mind, intelligence, and false ego, ahankara. So it's different from that. It's another energy of the Lord. And let me see how much more. Yeah, that's explained also in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, where Krishna explains the categorical difference between the Bhumirapo Nalo Vayu Kammano Buddhirevacha. He explains these are my 8 separated material energies, the gross earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and then the subtle mind, intelligence, and false ego, sense of identity that we take up, this false identity in the material world. One minute we are a carpenter, the next minute we are a woman, we are a man, we are black, white, yellow, we are a crocodile. So many, they're described as upadis, false identifications, temporary identifications. And Krishna's already explained that we go from dehino sminyata dehe komanam yovanam jara. We go from childhood to youth to old age, and we keep identifying. I'm a child, I'm a young person, I'm an old person. But Krishna is explaining to Arjuna very succinctly that you're none of these things. Temporarily you're appearing like that, but don't foolishly identify yourself as being that. That's the trick. The trick is to see the spool, just like in an old film reel, they used to have the spools, and they basically each one, you see that in the Bhagavad-gita, there's a picture like that. So each picture, you get it even in modern videos, you can edit videos through the different aperture, whatever it's called. You know what, I think we know how to explain. So the problem for the living entity is we stop and we think, yes, this is who I am, this is what I am. But no, we should see that it is all temporary at every state. And it's amazingly constructed so that it just seems to keep moving all the time. But it's changing at every second. Even as we speak, the body that we are sitting in now is no longer existing. The cells have changed and replicated in different ways. It's an amazing arrangement. So, that spiritual, that perfect intelligence can be developed through the process of spiritual life. And Prabhupada's discussing that the Hatha Yoga system is not meant simply for some material profit in some way, either making profit from becoming a yoga teacher to teach people how to sit in so many different ways, or that you get some material benefit from the Hatha Yoga. You increase your longevity, your health, your appearance. You can look super wonderfully beautiful and fit. This is a material profit. But it's meant for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. So that is the purpose, Hatha Yoga. And I should go, we'll go back to it hopefully later on as I was explaining. That's the 8 gross material elements that Krishna explains. And he says, apariyam itastvanyam prakriti vidi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayitam daryate jagat. That besides these inferior energies of mine, they're all divine energies. Because why? Because they belong to me, Krishna says. But above that, there is a higher energy, which are the living entities. See if we can quickly look at that without dropping everything. Hare Krishna. Okay. Besides this inferior nature, Almighty Armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mind, which are all living entities who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. So here we find the position of this atomic soul, what it tends to do. It struggles with the material nature and sustains the universe. The universe is manifested for the living entities who want to manifest a sense of false proprietorship and ownership of so many energies, and it goes on in that way. So that categorically we're different. So this is a higher, besides the inferior nature of the body. There's, again, it's so important to grasp this, because we're all very much in the material world identifying ourselves to be the body, I and mine thinking. So it has to be mentioned again and again, because besides this material inferior nature, there's a superior energy, which are the living entities. And then Krishna goes on to say that who are falsely identifying with the material nature, they're struggling with this material, and they're sustaining the whole universe. So if we can understand that, we're onto a great thing. If we can get that understanding, we're really onto it. We've made a massive leap in our involvement. You know, Darwin's concept of what is it called? Evolution, the evolvement. So yes, the idea is the soul's supposed to evolve and to become cleansed of all these different contaminations of mind and false ego and identity, and become situated in his real glory as the eternal spirit soul. So that is the evolutionary process of the soul, to come through the modes of nature, purify the intelligence, and become situated once more in his divinity as a part and parcel of the Lord. Okay, so continuing. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures, and it is also actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only the insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading Vishnu Tattva. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. According to the Mundaka Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity. Now, it's to be understood, it is a very subtle energy, just like the mind. And intelligence and ahankara. There's subtle energy. So sometimes people say, oh, well, you can have a heart transplant. What happened to the soul? It's in the heart, and we take the heart out, and is the soul still in the heart? This is called gross measurement. Trying to understand, trying to measure, trying to understand with the dull brain Yeah, so we don't do so well trying to understand and measure and come to the conclusive understanding of our situation in this world through our limited sense perception is not a very good way. But we hear that there's subtle energies that pervade the body. The soul is pervading the body, and it is situated in the heart, the region of the heart. So if you go to some extraneous endeavor to remove the heart and say, oh no, the soul's in here, you're really tampering with stuff, and chances are you won't get it, you won't understand it. So anyway, we'll continue with Prabhupada's purport. This atomic soul is situated in the region of the heart of every living entity, and because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them assert foolishly that there is no soul. Can't see it, can't measure it. Pretty small. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart along with the super soul. Oh, you didn't see the super soul either, did we? But you can't see the mind, isn't it? You can't see the mind. But we all know you have a mind, I have a mind. These subtle elements are harder to perceive, what to speak of the soul. And thus, all the energies of the bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. Say that again. Thus, all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles which carry the oxygen from the lungs gather energy from the soul. Very logical. Makes complete sense. I don't have a great understanding of all these things, but we know that the blood circulates throughout the body and it comes back to the heart. It's pumped through the body. And it carries oxygen from the lungs, gathers from that area the oxygen. And that oxygen, we understand all of these functions are given energy from the soul. So the lungs it says, the corpuscles which carry oxygen from the lungs gather energy from the soul in that region of the heart. When the soul passes away from this position, it's interesting, another example comes to mind, isn't it? When you're in a car and you leave the car and you leave the engine running. So you can still exist outside of the car, and you can come back to the car and then utilize the car again. Similarly, it's an analogy. When the soul passes away from this position in the heart, activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit whole are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine, there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. Neither Vedic knowledge nor modern science denies the existence of the spirit soul in the body, and the science of the soul is explicitly described in the Bhagavad-gita by the personality of Godhead himself. Neither Vedic knowledge nor modern science denies the existence of the spirit soul in the body, and the science of the soul is explicitly described in the Bhagavad-gita by the personality of Godhead himself. Nadhyayate mriyate vakarachchinnayam budva bhuvitavana boya ajo nityam shashvatam parano nahanyate hanyamare sarire. For the soul, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing and undying. He is not slain when the body is slain. So this is the subject matter to be understood, the difference between matter and spirit. And if we can apply ourselves to understanding this, then we have the greatest knowledge. Raja Vidya Raja Goyam Pavitramidam Uttamam Pratyakshabhagamam Dharmyam Shushukam Kartamavyayam. This knowledge is the king of education. It's the most secret of all secrets, although it's an open secret. It can be most secret of all, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. And that's the actual business of religion, is to give this understanding. It's not just meant for leaving off at living comfortably in the material world and going to church or going to the temple and acknowledging the existence of God, but it's meant to go further, to reestablish a lost loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So conventional religion generally is like that. God is the order supplier. So if we're pious enough, we will approach God. And Krishna explains all this in Bhagavad-gita. That those who are pious will approach me, and those who are impious will not approach. But it's meant to go beyond that, because that simply keeps us here in the material world and leaves God in, or should we say, doesn't leave God at all. It just leaves us with the concept of God as being some kind of order supplier, and God, or Krishna, God, he is not so happy to see us in that condition, because he knows that whatever he supplies, whatever you dream up to desire, and whatever he supplies will not bring you the satisfaction you desire, and you will simply become frustrated. So he doesn't want that. That's also explained in the, I think it's the 4th chapter, 10th verse of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, that being freed from attachment, fear, and anger. Where is that verse? It's 4:10. 4:10. See if we can. 4:10. Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mamu Pasrita. 4:10. Bhavo Jnana Tapasa. Bahavo Jnana Tapasa Putamad Bhavamagata. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So that's what Krishna wants. He wants us to attain transcendental love for him and not simply have him as an order supplier. So Krishna will do that. Krishna is the super soul in everyone's heart, and he says everything comes from me: knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness. He says, I'm directing the wanderings of all living entity. I am fulfilling all the desires of the living entity. But that is only that feature of the Lord. And he does that to fulfill our material desires, but he has his own existence beyond the function of being an order supplier for people in the material world. He has his eternal abode, and he's inviting us to associate with him in an eternal mood of loving service. That is what he wants, and that he knows is what we need. So Krishna says to Arjuna in the 2nd chapter, text 45, he says that the Vedas deal mainly with the 3 modes of material nature. I want you to rise above these modes of material nature and the Vedic instructions to become well situated in this world and to become transcendental to all of that, Arjuna. Become established in the self. And when you realize the nature of the self, you will realize that you have your eternal existence. I want you to go back home, back to Godhead. So that is continually throughout Bhagavad Gita and through all the other Vaishnava literatures, this point is being made. How to live in the world, how to develop that relationship. it's amazing because Krishna is constantly doing, he's oscillating back and forward. He is, you can do this, and this is what the result will be. This is how it will affect you. You can worship the demigods. You can have impersonal liberation in different ways. But back to that verse that I did mention, 4:10, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, being freed from attachment. So the attachment, Srila Prabhupada in the purport explains the attachment is for the material world. While we're still attached to this material world, the bhoga and aishvarya, the sense gratification and the material opulences in different ways and shapes and forms, we're not interested to go further. We just, that's what we want. If we not get enough, we want more of it, and that's as far as we might go with our idea of relationship with God. So Prabhupada spends a lot of time to explain that due to that attachment, one is not interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The second category is fear of a personal relationship with a personal God. So if when it becomes frustrated, we understand that's the nature of the material entanglement. The material nature is very frustrating. The living entity tries to enjoy, but he becomes frustrated, and he wants to get freed from this. So he speculates on the ideas of maybe there's something more than this frustrating endeavor of material life. And then by speculation, we cannot understand the personality of Godhead, his unlimited expansions, his divine form, his pastimes, his leela, his entourage. You can't speculate through to that. At best, you'll come to an impersonal concept of Godhead, that there's obviously some source of everything, but through speculation, we can come to Brahman realization. So Prabhupada speaks at length on that those who have gone beyond the continual endeavor to enjoy in the material world, they speculate and come to impersonal concepts of God. God must be none of what we experience here. So there's no form, there's no activities, but they have some idea of the impersonal energies of God. And then Prabhupada says the final one is anger. So I was thinking of that. Anger is explained as a secondary emotion. It doesn't exist of its own. It comes after frustration. It's anger after frustration. So Srila Prabhupada links the Buddhists. It's very interesting because they're very interested in peace. I remember one conversation Srila Prabhupada was having with a nice Buddhist man, and Prabhupada was very cordial and friendly with him in the discussions. He was asking, what is your highest goal? And he was saying, peace, shanti. We want peace. And Prabhupada said, the cows are peaceful. Is that the highest goal of existence, to become a cow? If you have to become an animal, being a cow is not a bad idea. Well, in its original position, yes. But he was saying that this idea of peace, it comes through, the Buddhist idea comes through becoming frustrated with materialism. They are very clearly understanding that the material body is a source of misery and repeated births and deaths. So they want to dismantle the body, dismantle the whole thing, and see that it is all illusion. So there's no disagreement in all the seers of the truth in that sense. But they're frustrated with all the rituals of the Vedas. They see the frailties of that process, and they become disgusted with so many speculative ideas of God in this way and that way, and therefore they follow the path of sunyavadi, reduce it to zero, dismantle the whole thing. If you have no more material desires, you can be peaceful, then you will not have another material body. And that is their goal, is to come to sunya, or reduce it all to nothing. There's no need to come back to this existence. It's all illusion, etc., etc., etc. So Lord Krishna is speaking himself. He says, being freed from attachment to the material world and all its phantasmagoria, being freed from fear of a personal existence, and being freed from anger and being frustrated by the whole thing, from the materialism to the nirviseshavad, the impersonal ideas, and being so, and the frustrated anger, and just aiming for shanti and negation of everything. Then Krishna says, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me. Krishna is offering that. He offers that, especially at the end of Bhagavad-gita. Give everything up and surrender to me. I'll protect you. I'll deliver you. He says, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me. So that's what we're doing. We're finding out about Krishna. Krishna is explaining himself. And thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So this is what Krishna is offering to bring us from the first beginnings of understanding of that the soul is different from the body. Now, where are we? 17, isn't it? To know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. So we're going to hear a lot more of that. I'm going to maybe open for some reflections. Remember, you can pop any reflections, anything that has been presented in any of the verses that that Srila Prabhupada's quoted from and that I've gone to for further reference. Remember, there's a categorical difference that Krishna makes it very clear that there's a big difference between the earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the mind, the intelligence, and ahankara, the higher energy of mind, which is the living entity. And where is that living entity situated? Within the region of the heart. The material apparatus of the body replenishes its energy through that area and pumps blood and breathing and all the rest of it. Is animated. Living entity are situated within that. The human form of life is meant to understand this, to purify the intelligence so that we can become situated once more in our spiritual existence, which is a source of joy. It's an absolute source of joy for the conditioned soul. Stand in that way. So if there's anything that's piqued your interest or something, some comment that you'd like to make, or any specific question, then pop it into the chat box, and we will take a minute or so to maybe see that. Text number 17. So I know from reading this section of Bhagavad Gita, again, it's been so helpful to see how powerful Krishna is and how he speaks and brings us directly to the spiritual platform. Constantly he's doing it, and he doesn't stop to do it throughout the entire Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so looking at any reflections. Okay. All right, so we don't have any full reflections, just a few little comment, but no real reflection. So we'll finish at that point. We look forward to seeing you next week personally, and Krishnendra Prabhu is continuing also, and Atmananda Prabhu I think is on Sunday. So please stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.